Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MU-NCORP session at fall meeting. And thank everyone for coming today. As we have done the last several cycles, we're really looking forward to an engaging interactive session again today. I think this format has proven to be very popular. Dawn, you want to share a few things?
Sure. I mean, so in the past, we used to have an agenda and talk about the studies and sort of go through things that we felt like we had all these other forum for going over. And what we've found over the past couple meetings has been so instrumental in terms of guiding our priorities is actually engaging in a discussion. And so the last meeting we really heard from you and from the sites about, all the problems in terms of staff turnover and what people have done to, deal with it and strategies that they've put in place. And we've got suggestions, and some of that actually, we then passed on to various different people in SWOG, and it gave us ideas about which direction to go. What Ray and I really thought we could discuss during this meeting was getting more information on what strategies you've taken at your sites to increase diversity in clinical trial accrual. While we've heard a lot about, people having different initiatives and apps and videos and various different things, sometimes it's best to hear from the sites what they think, what they've done, and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and what you think we should be focusing on as a group or as an MU-NCORP going forward. So we wanted to hear what people's thoughts were about all of the initiatives that are going on in SWOG, and also about what your strategies have been. I don't know, Ray, if you want to expand on that.
So now that Kate's here, we have a quorum.
There's no escape. We're all friends.
So before we launch too far in, I think we typically ask our colleagues at NCI and MU-NCORP to just give us some general feedback about what's going on and what's coming around the corner and what priorities might be. So I don't know if Bernard is on for today, but Kate's here now. So Kate, I don't know, were you planning to would you be willing to just, whatever you have to share, we would gladly take.
Sure. So I think it's hard to know which way to stand. My back to you.
Whatever.
So I think from the cancer care delivery side, and I'll let Bernard and Leslie add in from cancer control. From cancer care delivery side, we've got a new study, the SWOG study that has recently opened, the Genomic Tumor Board. Saw an incredible amount of interest in that yesterday in the breakouts. Session. So are they not listening? Directory, which was terrific, and we are looking forward to. We have another study that's in review right now at NCI as well, coming from the SWOG research base. So more work coming forward, and I was just having a conversation with one of the investigators for the palliative care study that's being run out of the Rochester research base, about some adjustments that are being made there too. So I think there's a lot of work going on. And I also want to say, I think on the NCI side as a whole, we have definitely heard from all of you as we've traveled this fall, and also in our MU-NCORP annual meeting, about the staffing challenges that are out there, and really the innovative ways you are all trying to address that and thinking of how to be flexible and what you can do for that. So we're well aware of what's the challenges are, and we're really trying to do anything we can to that area as well. So I don't know if anybody had any specific questions, or I will remind everybody, because it's always about money. that it's time for your FFRs soon, your federal financial reports. Those are due in from your business offices. And please do include on there that how much, if any, of your unobligated balance might be cancer care delivery research. And then if you need some of that funding to conduct some work this year, that would be a carryover request. So please reach out if you have any questions regarding that.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Leslie? Well, so we have a little issue here. To start the online part of the meeting, it's asking for names and stuff that we don't have.
So Ray, can you hear me?
I'm, for those of you who don't know, I'm Leslie
You can't hear
Ford,
me.
and I have the distinction of having started the CCOP program and then now oversee both the community, the MU-NCORP program, as well as our drug development and early phase clinical trials in cancer prevention. And I wish I was standing up here and saying we've had these great successes in phase 1 and 2 trials, and we're about to hand off studies to the cooperative groups, but I'm not about to say that. We had some interesting, promising results that, when tested further, still need more work. So one of the things we've talked about a lot is topical applications of drugs like metabolites of tamoxifen for breast prevention, but are now working on reformulation of the topical products to enhance absorbability and things. So we're doing our due diligence before we launch any large initiatives. But having said that, there are 3 large initiatives that are ongoing and that are really under the microscope with respect to the MU-NCORP program, the Forte trial that recently opened, the pancreatic cyst trial run out of ECOG Akron that has been open, unfortunately, through the pandemic, which has made it very challenging. And of course, TMIST, which has a remarkable accrual of over 60,000, but unfortunately still needs another 40,000, 30,000, something like that. So those are being closely watched by NCI leadership, and we certainly hope that they will succeed, especially as we unfortunately come up to our renewal timeline. We at DCP and DCCPS have already started meeting about the timelines for the new RFA and what will be in it, and the evaluation of the current program in order to justify the continued expenditures for the program, and not just the continued expenditures, but actually requesting more to actually try and fund and provide resources based on what it really takes to do the job, which we are very aware you're underfunded, even though the numbers look big. So anyway, the better you do an accrual, the more we have to justify. So
Leslie,
yeah.
This is Jeff Berberg. Is Forte having trouble in the pool?
Well, it's not gangbusters.
We're having trouble, in Hawaii, because I pointed this out before, and people don't seem to pick up on. But our major insurer doesn't want to pay for that interval because of there's a major colon guideline saying it should be 10. They don't. 7.5 to 10 years, and so they won't at least they won't pay for if they're randomized to the 5. They don't want to pay, and the GI doctor who the people are really worried about the not being paid for in terms of the people that are in that window that they can pull out.
So you're saying they won't pay if they're randomized to the 5.
That's correct. They're concerned.
Yeah.
Now,
and you've talked to
we are working with the
Rocky.
insurer, because the insurer, interestingly enough, is actually a member of our Cancer Center Consortium. And they say they might be willing to change their mind or fund some, but I'm just wondering nationally if other people are having the same issue. I was
you need
told,
to bring it to Rocky,
I was
yeah.
told before that, no, it's not a problem. I mentioned it at one of the
That's what
NCORP meetings.
yeah.
I talked to Dr. Russo about it, and I think it is a problem.
Yeah, no, you got to bring it to the study PI. Rocky, I'm blanking on
I've talked to
Rocky's
them
last
about
name.
it, and they're like, it's not a problem, but
Well,
I think
mean,
it
if you
might
can
be a problem.
document it's a problem, it's a problem.
Yeah.
He can.
Are you getting that, like a
If you can-
pre-authorization
can I just
for the
ask,
5 years?
Please
They're
speak
just-
to the microphone.
If you don't speak into the microphone, then the people online can't hear you, so.
I'm curious with your experience, are you getting prior authorization for the 5-year? I mean, I'm honestly not sure as we just start to enroll to Forte. I'm not sure we're going to know that that's an issue until we get to that 5-year colonoscopy and then we try to get prior authorization. So frankly, if it's an issue, it might become a big problem because we're going to have patients get to the 5-year point, insurance is going to deny it, and then you're going to lose a whole bunch of patients on study. So I don't know how you know that it's not going to be paid for.
Our chief of GI, who's also a member of our cancer center, he is just concerned because he knows the insurance company, and he's
So
thinking.
you haven't gotten actual denials yet?
We've approached them and initially, and they said they won't approve
Well,
it.
when we did P1, the stock answer was no. They wouldn't pay for mammograms. I know it was a different era. Nobody would ever not pay for a mammogram now in a high-risk woman. But believe it or not, in 1992, they wouldn't. And we just had to not take no for an answer. So.
Well,
I guess it's important to know if that's a reason why.
Oh, absolutely.
Ahead of time. If sites are hearing from the gastroenterologist or just based on their own personal experience that they're not getting those approvals, it may be just a disincentive to be enthusiastic about the trial.
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying
Yeah.
it has to be taken to Rocky Schroen so he can.
I mentioned
do
to
something
him
that-
earlier, and he
But
said
now if it's actually
he doesn't think
happening-
it's going to be a problem.
But thinking it's going to be a problem and now you documenting that it is a problem are two
We might be
different
able to
things.
work it out locally because they said they might be willing to approve 25 or something like that.
Well,
Just
25 is.
be better than
yeah.
nothing, right?
Yeah, but it's still a drop in the bucket.
But
yeah.
still, it is a problem. I don't
So
know
we
another
should-
insurance. It's going to vary depending on the insurer, I
know,
think.
Right.
Where,
So
where
I think
am,
it's, right.
people with polyps have colonoscopies every 3 years
Right.
or less, and
Right.
everything is paid for. So
Right.
it's hard for me to believe that in the long run, they're really going to deny these for people with
Right.
polyps. These are not, they might be low-risk polyps, but they are.
Sure.
I mean, I
known
do
polyps.
think that a bigger question is, given the recent study in the New England Journal about screening in general, whether,
So bad.
I know, but I agree, but it does have a potential impact on people's enthusiasm to join the study.
Yeah.
And whether the scientific community understands what the nature of that trial was, you have to have a message to the patients that are out there saying, I just saw in the New York Times that colonoscopies don't work, right? So whatever we believe, in terms of the quality of what that question was, it could potentially impact accrual.
Sure. That's why we have futility analyses
Right.
built into our studies now. But that's all a long way of saying we have a number of large trials that consume a lot of resources. And, if they can't be done, we need to know it.
So
And the study PIs need to know the problems that you're encountering.
So Bernard, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to the discussion. You just need to unmute, and I'm hoping we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry that I'm not able to attend with you. I'm here at home monitoring on my father's situation. He's being hospitalized with a cardiac condition. And I had to step away as I received some information from his cardiologist a few minutes ago. The last time I thought I heard, I think I heard Leslie was mentioning about the need for, I guess, increased participation from the MU-NCORP sites with regards to accrual to the major 5 prevention studies. And I think I heard Jeff mentioning about concerns about insurance or coverage or something with Forte. I just wanted to point out that we are having meetings, monthly meetings, and so I, along with my colleague Jennifer Pock, with Sandy Russo, have been reaching out to certain MU-NCORP sites that are accruing quite well to participate in the monthly meetings with the PIs for each of the 5, well, each of the 4 of the 5, that is with Rocky over Forte, with Forte, with the pancreatic cyst leadership, and with the green tea study, as well as with SWOG. So with those 4 or 5, we're going to reach out soon to Etta Pisano for the TMIST for her advice about how to help to improve accrual. But the way we are planning to try to help with improving accrual for these studies is through our previous partners initiative. Partners is a workshop that we had established a few years ago during the COVID, at the beginning of the COVID era. And actually we were blessed to have Ray to speak at the first workshop. He did a wonderful job. And so it's through that mechanism that we are hoping to improve primary care and non-oncologists' engagement, since they have proven for prevention studies to be paramount and salient for getting these otherwise, except for the green tea, but otherwise non-oncology patients to get them accrued to these studies. So that's really all I wanted to mention. And please feel free to reach out to me, call me, or email me if you all are interested. If anyone's interested in, calling in, or rather representing yourselves with these monthly, partners PI meetings for these for these prevention studies. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. I think Warda also, I see your hand up. If there's, if you want to just unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, everyone. I just wanted to add to a couple of the comments. So I remember the discussion that Dr. Berenberg had with Rocky Sean. And I think one of the things that NCI can do is that there is a committee that looks at insurance analysis, but has not done a great job for prevention because we haven't really had that many trials. But I think one of the things that I'd like to advocate for is that we have a thorough investigation, because I remember Rocky saying he doesn't think it was an issue. And as Bernard has just mentioned, sites can certainly come on and give some details. But I think centralizing it and having someone in place to try to answer some of these questions from a national level, I think will be helpful for everyone. And I'm happy to advocate for that at NCI.
Thank you, Warda. Very helpful. So we want to now go on to the main discussion today, which is to talk about.
I think it stays on.
Okay.
I think we're good.
We want to talk about diversity issues, challenges, but more importantly, solutions. What have we experienced, and what have we done at our various institutions to overcome the challenges of opening access to diverse populations?
This is even better. So first, I want to thank you for the presentation you gave at the Wake Forest meeting. I thought it was phenomenal. I'd love everyone to be able to hear it. And then I want to talk about what we've done at our site. We have our site, I'm from upstate Carolina, MU-NCORP, and I specifically work at the Spartanburg Medical Center affiliated sites. And what we've done is that we ask everyone who qualifies for a clinical trial if they're willing to enroll. And you'd be surprised how many people are willing to enroll regardless of their background, the color of their skin. Additionally, we were fortunate enough to receive a Moonshot Engagement Grant, and we developed a novel position that was partially funded through that engagement grant of someone that we called an engagement coordinator. And then purely by chance, we had literally the perfect applicant come. Her name is Adriana Carrington. She has an undergraduate degree in biology or chemistry and a master's in engaged community medicine. And for a year, she acted as our engagement coordinator for Moonshot with the ultimate goal to over-enroll African Americans with either multiple myeloma or prostate cancer, because we have huge disparities in our state around those two diseases. Because of staffing issues, I actually functioned as the coordinator for Moonshot for that year with Adriana, but very quickly recognized that she had the brains, the skill, the drive to be promoted to be a coordinator. And so with the awarding of our second Moonshot Engagement Grant, we were able to actually send Adriana to some formal training about research, as well as mentor her and promote her. And she is our Moonshot lead coordinator, and she continues to engage the patients. We also identified a physician champion. And by the way, both Adriana and this particular physician champion are African Americans. And I think that you have to do more than just say that it's important to you to enroll. I think that you also need to surround yourself with a representative workforce and make that commitment. And through that, I believe it fluctuates depending on the day how many patients Adriana has enrolled, which, by the way, it's not an easy study to which to enroll. But we're running around 60% African American enrollment. So I also think, and I'll just say this because you spoke at Wake Forest and also URCC, which are two of obviously our research bases that only do cancer control and CCDR. They'll actually say, for example, the direct study through URCC, we are going to enroll 600 Black patients, and we are going to enroll, I can't remember, I think 1,000 white patients. And then once that, once that's filled, you're only going to enroll the people that you're missing. And I think that if you really make a commitment, if it's really important to you, then you will do something like that instead of just saying it's important. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much. I mean, I do think part of some of the new initiatives are to figure out which trials we need to over-accrue because the question's so critically important. I think some of the studies you're mentioning are studies that a priori were decided to have, like URCC has a trial now for IO toxicity specifically, I think. I don't know if it's only open to Black patients, and white, but it's 50-50. I don't know what their strategy is going to be if they don't get that. There are some statistical challenges if you shut down one arm and only accrue to another, because I think that happened on an ECOG-ACRIN trial. And then they spent several years trying to accrue the Asian group. It was a cancer control trial, but it makes then other things change over that period of time. So it makes sometimes, so I do think it's, we do need to put more thought, time, and energy. I know that for SELECT, for example, a priori, the decision was made to over-accrue African American, and they did, and it was important, and it answered important questions. So we definitely need to think about those those strategies up front for doing that. And you're right about having a representative workforce that needs to come from all different angles, but also, from the earliest angle to bring people up and encourage people to have careers in medicine so that we can broaden the workforce as well. Now, I don't know, Eric, if I can put you on the spot in terms of some of our strategies are really different. We are at a minority underserved MU-NCORP site, but we accrue a lot of patients from our community, which are mostly patients that are Dominican. So we have a very high percentage of patients that go on clinical trials that are Hispanic. And we've put a whole variety of strategies into place to try to improve our accrual and diversity to trials. I don't know if you want to mention some of those initiatives or not.
Thank you. Hi, yes, my name is Eric. I'm the administrator for the MU-NCORP for Columbia. We've done a few approaches. Our breast group is usually the largest contributors to our clinical trials, but we wanted to expand outside of that a few years ago. So we did a few approaches and ones that we're implementing currently as well. For our MU-NCORP trials, for example, we've advertised them in bright pink clinical trial worksheets that we have sitting in the clinic rooms so that so the physicians can't ignore them and that they're the forefront of their mind. And it has worked because for one of our sub-affiliates, we've started to see an increase in enrollments. Additionally, I've decided to start engaging with postdocs and our public health school who can't necessarily serve as PIs, but can serve as co-Is who might be supportive of these trials as well. We've also started to attend every research meeting that we have available at Columbia to talk about our CCDR portfolio and our supportive care trials, and talk at length to the point that most of the other oncologists are now invested into it as well. We have our champion system with most of our younger oncologists who have a lighter workload, who are interested in growing in research. We recently engaged with the first-year fellows within Columbia just to explain our cancer research structure, but then also to go on and explain about the MU-NCORP. So we've been doing numerous strategies. We've automated we tried to take off some of the workload from the oncologists and implemented electronic screening reports that my coordinator Claire over here goes through. And because of that, we've had great representation, minority representation on our clinical trials. We've reached our NCI accruals during the pandemic twice and had the NCI increase our accruals again, and we're already 50% to reaching our accruals for one of our categories. So we've thought about innovative approaches, and I also can attest that the great turnover or the great resignation is alive and true. One of my coordinators just resigned this morning, but on me unexpectedly, but we persevere, figure out different strategies as well, and leveraging other systems and finding those people that are interested has been paramount for us. And these strategies also, even if we do lose staff, are still carrying us over where we are expected to meet those accrual goals and to serve the MU-NCORP.
Have you tried stories about or sharing stories?
Can you, if you speak through the mic so they can hear online, thanks.
Have you tried sharing stories from those participants, especially in Spanish, having a little clip or a little interview that they can tell you, that how the trial helped her or how she felt participating in a trial, and the patient side, right? So one of the things that help patients is listening to other person or someone like you that did it and give them trust. So just ideas that that could help. When I was diagnosed, a lot of people came to me and just talking about the chemo and things like this, and seeing someone who went through it helps them. So
Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. I was actually recently rethinking about sometimes how our coordinators explain trials, and then they explain them beautifully, but also potentially incorporating stories into how somebody else had experienced the trial and using that as part of the informed consent process. Nowhere to say that this is how it worked for somebody, it's going to work for you, but this is what somebody got out of it, and maybe this is also how you could benefit as well.
And I mean, I would also say that one thing that, we've spending a lot more time having our coordinators here, like from our community outreach and engagement groups, to understand our community a lot better. For all of, especially with such high turnover, to really understand the culture better, so that, you can be more engaged and sympathetic to where people are coming from, and, what issues are most important. So I think we have we now have like a community engagement component of our clinical trials staff to really help educate all the, the first line coordinators in terms of cultural issues, in our community.
I have sort of a question in that regard. So we've just modified the language policy of our cancer center. We haven't completely implemented it, and we're thinking about, having more of the OHRP short forms. But the problem is, I think other people have pointed out, that so many of the trials have mostly PROs or other forms that are not validated for those languages or for those cultures. Can there be some exceptions on certain kinds of trials? If a trial is, or maybe there's some other ways that people that don't speak English can express their quality of life, such as visual scales or other things that could be built in that might be appropriate, so that we could maybe enroll people who don't speak either, English or Spanish or Mandarin, which are the three languages that are being concentrated on by the NCI leadership. Otherwise, unless it's something like the TMIS trial or maybe the Forte trial, which don't require those kind of forms, you really can't put people on trials that speak Korean or speak, Japanese or one of the Filipino languages like in Hawaii, which are really common. So I just wonder about that.
I didn't know if that's something that the NCI wants to comment on. I mean, it's a big challenge, as we've increased the patient-reported outcomes in our trials, and, to have whole groups that don't fill them out. I think it probably does depend on the endpoint of the trial, but thinking about whether or not it's better to accrue the patient and not have them do the PROs versus, is that what you're asking?
Well, you're just excluding, I mean, we have so many immigrants or recent, in our population, and you're basically excluding other than the Spanish-speaking population, or in some cases, maybe in the future Chinese, you're excluding a lot of other people, particularly, and many of them are high-risk individuals, like the Micronesian population or immigrant Polynesian population, let's say in our state. It's a real problem.
So you want more languages in the translated documents? Is that what it is?
The problem is, I think that Diane St. Germain could comment on, but you can't just translate a PRO. You have to then go through the issue, is it valid in people from that background, et cetera.
Right, so, I mean, just to be clear, I think a lot of clinical trials are trying to use the PROMIS instruments that have multiple languages validated to a certain extent, but you can't just translate a patient-reported outcome, and it's complicated. That being said, I know that the NCI got moonshot funding to really try to expand the number of different instruments and in multiple different languages, so that it wouldn't be so much of a barrier. and probably are going through trying to expand the number of.
No, I haven't heard
of
any
instruments.
recent, I was on the diversity group before, and I'm not on it now, and I haven't heard any updates. Or maybe someone could update that, what's happening now. It would be nice to know. I haven't heard anything about it. Beyond Mandarin and Spanish is the last I heard.
I don't know, is Diane St. Germain on? I didn't see her name on the. Diane, are you on by any chance? What are anybody, the issue of additional language, validated language translations, versions of instruments?
Yeah, the contract has been slow with that. I think it's on point now, but it did take quite a while. I think that that team also did a survey, and we were surprised because for a lot of places we did get feedback. We certainly got feedback from Hawaii, but the bottom line is that the contract, it has continued. There was some slowing down a bit. So that project is still, existing, and hopefully there will be results. It was just sort of updated at the Moonshot leadership a couple of weeks ago, so.
Great, thank you, Walter. So we do have 26 participants online. So Leslie Weiserstein says, Eric, she suggests that you should connect with the folks that produce the CRA newsletter on the SWOG website to share some of your ideas and efforts. She thinks that would be very beneficial to a lot more people.
Absolutely. I was also quite proud of my pink newsletters that I put everywhere. People had commented they were so obnoxious, it was hard to ignore them.
I have a smaller ball question along the lines of language barriers. So just an anecdote. We recently had a lung cancer patient at my institution, Spanish speaker, came with her daughter who speaks English and Spanish. Doctor wanted to put her on a clinical trial, but we were told it would take 3 weeks to get all kinds of language things done, even though there was a Spanish consent. Well, that just seemed really strange to me. In the end, the doctor had to take the patient on and treat her off trial. So is this a typical experience or what?
You have to have a certified translator. The family member is not allowed to be the translator.
Was it that you didn't have a consent stamped in Spanish? What was?
So so I asked the question, but this is a CIRB study. There are Spanish language versions of this, but I was told there were additional documents that would need to be. I think in that case, there's a cost letter in the HIPAA form. Okay. So the consent was available for the translation, but there are additional things, and you have to get a certified interpreter. So there's other steps besides just the consent.
I don't think if you have the SERB approved full translation, you don't need a certified translator, but you can't use the family member.
Yeah, but yeah, we have those. We have these video translation services that are HIPAA compliant and so on. So that was in the barrier. The barrier was with the clinical trials related documents.
The HIPAA form also has to be translated and approved, because we had the same problem with that as well.
Could you utilize the short form and then wait for the documents to be? Kamara certainly knows more than I.
Well, I was going to say, I think that a short form is what we do. We translate it, and then we have our translator there to translate from English to the other language, Spanish. And then meanwhile, we get the full everything approved, and then we consent the patient. But they can be consented by a short form. Maybe institutional, might be different, but that's what we do at our site.
So I think the issue was not the consent
but
itself.
The HIPAA.
It was the.
Okay.
So are these problems that others run into at other institutions? Does it have a solution? Because I'm worried about the next time.
Well, I don't have a solution, but I have a question on top.
Yeah.
For the HIPAA, how many sites still do study specific HIPAAs? Because we're running into the translation with the HIPAA as well. And all of a sudden our HIPAA compliance officer is like, no, you have to have this set up. And so to pay for all those translations isn't efficient. So we're trying to get a unified research HIPAA. Would love to know how many sites are doing that so I can go back and say, hey, all these other people are doing it. We want to do it this way.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, because obviously if you're at a site where, 35% of your patients are Spanish speaking, then you have all of these things done and it just becomes what you do. But if you're at a site where it's 5% or 2% and it comes up every so often, it's expensive. That's at least what I'm hearing. And I'm just wondering if this, hearing now from a couple people that are all nodding here, if this is a barrier, maybe this is something that can be centralized as the IRBs are being done. Because at least, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're getting the Spanish translated IRB documents, but not the translated HIPAA and financial documents. Yes, because I see nods
The HIPAA.
for those of you online.
The HIPAA is really institution, like that's their ownership. So I don't think the CIRB can do that. And the other thing with the short forms with Spanish consent, CIRB recently changed their policies. And if they have a translated version available, you're really should use that. And you can't use the short forms anymore, which makes a new navigation for sites that don't have Spanish speaking or way to incorporate their boilerplate language into the consent. So there's been a lot of different barriers that have come up with being able to navigate to get past some of that piece. But yeah, if there was like some way to say, here's a research template that one site uses, you can still change that locally.
So like maybe some central source. So if one site, I'm just throwing this out there, if one site translates everything, their HIPAA forms, it's a lot easier to modify that for your institution and a lot cheaper because it's already been translated than to start from scratch to do it on your own. Is that, I just want to make sure I understand.
Being the sites that have the 5% Hispanics and it's not the everyday thing, we don't have a lot of experts and it's harder to get the resources for that. So having a place to even find, here's a tip and trick, or like, here's a site that you can go to look to get more information, because it's more work for our compliance officers as well to go down that path. So it's just not the norm. It's doable, you can do it, you can find a way, but it takes more resources and time to get the answers.
I see.
So Christina Gardner at Ozarks says they have one HIPAA that has blanks to fill in the study name and number, the treating investigator and coordinator names and contact information, and that they recently had that document and their informed consent boilerplate translated into Spanish. So that sounds like solutions coming from out in the field there.
Can I ask what I'm so sorry, what is a cost letter? Is that letting the patient know what they may be liable for? And do you, and just so you know, I do cancer control and CCDR protocols, so there's usually not a cost, but do you give that to every patient who goes on trial?
So I have to say, is this on? Phil Lammers, I work at Ray's place, so Ray does all the work usually, and I just...
No, it's the other way around. He's being falsely modest about this.
Unfortunately, neither one of us are experts in this area. So, but what I was told is, yes, each patient gets a letter about cost, especially on treatment-related studies where they're getting maybe extra scans and extra things. So for each study, it needs to be individualized, and I think that was the big holdup with this case, is that we had to go through a translation service to get that translated before we could enroll the patient.
So I'm just thinking, SWOG Hope Foundation has invested a lot in like activities to try to increase accrual, but it sounds like this is like an infrastructure piece that would really be helpful to sites if there was some way to help as a central resource, or having some central resources that I'm just trying to think of like how we could translate, so to speak, these different comments to a solution that we could help with. Because if there's a barrier that is fixable, then we want to roll up our sleeves and figure out how to fix it.
Yeah. So cost letters, is this new?
Generic form, is that And acceptable at the sites to just.
But
to
it
fill
sounds
in the
like you
blanks?
need some kind of central,
Yeah.
like, it would, this is what I'm trying to understand. Is it like a central translation, or is it access to like the documents that are already translated, or a service, like a centralized service that could help with some of this?
This is Kamara with Upstate Carolina NCORP. I will just say, at least for our institution, everything, we have a boilerplate for our Upstate Carolina NCORP. It's very specific to the agreement that all of our affiliate sites use for our informed consent, and we cannot move away from that. So to do a translation, it wouldn't really help our institution unless I'm taking what's, we modify every consent form to add our additional language.
Right. Well, I'm not talking about the consent,
you're
because that's done by the central IRB,
Right.
through the NCI. We're talking about these other kinds of documents that I
HIPAA
guess,
documents,
HIPAA documents, these other documents that I
financial.
guess
Right.
sites don't have access to translating.
Well, our HIPAAs are institutional as well, so I'm not sure if anyone else has comment.
And as far as translating, I will just say that we have had to translate, and we've actually utilized our language department, which of course they charge us, but they actually returned it pretty quickly. So I'm
Right.
sure you guys are at a much bigger place than me, so I'm sure you have one.
So I'm just, I guess what I'm asking for is like, if we had a translation service, like if there was access to sites that needed these small documents translated because they don't have access, because they're small, and, to have some of these other forms translated that would be specific for their institution, would that be of help?
Yeah, I think so.
So would that then be done per study? So each time there's a study approved, there will be a process to activate the automatic translation of all the relevant documents into the most common languages? Is that what you're thinking, Dawn, or what?
No, I'm thinking that you have a document, there's one document that's stopping you at your site that's institution specific from enrolling Spanish-speaking patients, but you don't either have a translation service or the funds to translate it, that we have a centralized translation service. So you can send that document to us, we can translate it and send it back. That kind of thing. I'm just thinking off the top of my head to try to figure out if something like that would be of service. Like, when it is true, when you're at a site that has 30% Spanish-speaking page, we have all kinds of services in place. But if it's few and far between, maybe that's what's causing some of the problem.
Did that come back with a central IRB stamp on it?
I don't know. I don't know what the logistics are. I think you would probably, but we could at least, we may not know the answers, but we can at least
can
try to
ask
see if we
them.
can find the people that might.
So I was gonna say, I'm Barbara Segarra, patient advocate. I don't work in any NCORP or anything, but I'm always trying to see how we can help more. And listening to these stories get me frustrated, right? Because that person lost opportunity. And from your talk to the patient advocate last year about trials giving the treatment from tomorrow today, and I have stolen that from you and cited you every time I go. I think, our people are missing that opportunity, right? And in 10 minutes, we came up here with 2 or 3 hurdles that we meet every year maybe, and nobody has bring it up. So can we do something to kind of ask the sites different areas? And I'm with Dawn, right? We can create many champions and other things, but we have to go to the practice. And what you mentioned today is really, really important. And from what we're gathering here, we can see what are the problems and see how SWOG can help. And even we have an NCORP in Puerto Rico, and there's a lot of things that are already in Spanish, and see how they can collaborate, right? So I'm just putting it out there and just being, thank you for what you do.
So a few comments online. So again, Christina Gardner at Cancer Research of the Ozarks. They use HIPAA for all 20 component sites, of which many of which are unaffiliated institutions. So you have your document, one common document everybody agrees to use. And then Connie Zepanek says the centralized translation service sounds like a really valuable resource to explore. Lots of love for that idea, Dawn. I mean, Christina says access to a translation service would be beneficial with, an exclamation mark. We had trouble locating a service that was cost effective and provided a translation certificate. Our in-house translation service for our largest group of sites was quite expensive and did not provide a certificate of translation, which was required by CIRB. So I think that's part of what, Phil was just asking here. We had to find an external company and several were not interested in translating one form. And then Natalie Perry, it might be good to get feedback from the regulatory folks at different sites as they're often the ones who work on these documents.
Right. I mean, so I can tell you just on the research side where we've needed things translated, I'm always surprised, like if it's an explanation. So it's not like a PRO that needs to be translated, but it's an explanation. You're going to be filling out a PRO, so it doesn't need validation. I'm like, oh, well, we can do that at our institute. We often, from other investigators are getting documents, translating and sending them back because so many people don't have that access to that kind of service. And this is illuminating because, this is a fixable problem, right? So we need to invest in figuring out how to fix this problem because I'm always struck because when people say, oh, population X or population Y they feel they don't want to go on trials. Well, my personal experience is that, our underserved patients are more willing to go on clinical trials. If you approach patients and spend time with them like our research team does, they are super enthusiastic. Sometimes it's our highest end patients that are the least interested in going on trials. And it's all about making people feel comfortable. Yep. So if, some of the myths and biases and, that we sort of disseminate, I don't know if that's a how much is a reality or if it's site specific. But in my experience, if we don't make patients have to be delayed like you were experienced, if we have all these things ready, if we have good translation services that can engage the patients, then, more often than not, people are willing to at least listen about the trial. So those are structural barriers that we should be able to solve. And we have to, whether it's getting a task force together, asking for Hope Foundation funding and figuring out a solution, we need more information so that we can work to try to solve this problem.
And the Hope Foundation is extremely interested in supporting everything about the diversity equity mission. I think at this meeting, you've probably heard now, we have a whole new group coming together. Don Deason is now going to be leading that group. He's going to bring some serious chops to this problem. He's going to recruit a team that's going to strategize and then figure out the tactics and all the resources that we need. The Hope Foundation is committed, to investing in this. I can say I am the chair of the foundation. Joe Horn is super, super enthusiastic about this, and Chuck Blanke definitely is too. So extending that, maybe wrong crowd to ask a question like this too, but are there any questions about the value? Why would we even spend an hour talking about diversity, for goodness sake? Is this just a hot, is this just a flavor of the month kind of thing, or does this resonate anywhere near the heart of what we all want to be about? I mean, I don't want to presume that we have common understanding, because that always sets us up to fail, I think.
Well, so I'm Jim Wade, Central Heartland CCOP, and we do fairly well with accrual. We have about 10% minority population in our service area that's primarily Midwest, and that reflects fairly closely to what our accrual is. Not quite synonymous, but close. But we know we can do better. And in talking with patients, I think the major problem is that we're not like them, and there's trust, and there's Tuskegee, and all these issues continue to come back. And what helped, I'm glad you said it, Dawn, because in the SELECT trial, there were these wonderful videos that were extremely well done by minority individuals talking about the value of participating in a clinical trial. And I think the cost and availability and able to put those kinds of tools into our practice website or into informational videos patients could watch while they're waiting to see us would go a long way to helping reduce, I think, some of the innate worries that minority patients feel when they come to us. Because now when they walk in the door, they're afraid. And they're afraid that they're going to get, backdoor treatment. And if we can give them information ahead of time that we want them to be a part of this process, and we have people like them talking about the importance of being in this process, would be helpful. So, the video for PCPT was great. If there was just a general video, either from a HOPE or the NCI about participating from minorities, or something that we could put into our website. We have doctor testimonials about how great they are, but we'd love to have some patient testimonials from minority people that we could put on our website talking about the importance of studies.
And FDA has a site, and it's in Spanish. They have and they have videos of patients talking in Spanish. And we should have something here, but for now, at least that's a link that could have, and they have material that you can download and have in the waiting room.
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
I think maybe Barbara, we can think in some of these other committees about like a resource page that has links to, because there are videos like that do exist, and we don't even need to recreate the wheel, although we may rebrand it. But the NCI has videos, at least general videos about participating in clinical trials. The NCI, yeah, without a doubt, there's a lot of diversity, and they're in multiple different languages, and we used to use those in our waiting room. So maybe it's less about recreating them, although for big studies, we may want to make them study specific, but having resource pages and ideas like put this on your website, put this in your waiting room if you have a video player. These are things that you can do.
Facebook videos.
Right. And then also the things that have been put together by the Recruitment and Retention Committee and things like that.
Just a brief comment. I think diversity is more than just, one race or ethnic group.
Right.
It also goes to, the rural, to people who have economic and they're crowded where they live, to the LGBT and to the elderly, AYA. There's so many different groups, number one. And I think one of the things, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway, that I think SWOG needs to focus on, in addition to diversity and equity, is also the disparities aspect of the research portfolio, which I don't think has been really identified. And I really think that needs to be brought into this conversation. Personally, I think the name of the Recruitment and Retention Committee, I've told them multiple times on the call, I think it's not the correct name. We're not just interested in recruiting people who look different from ourselves. We're interested in seeing what are the problems of these different populations. How can we address them? Saying health disparities has to be brought into this language. This is my feeling.
Yeah, they're the disparities that you see and the disparities that you don't. So Leslie, I don't know.
Please use the microphone. There are complaints
So
online.
something, and I think I mentioned this to you, Dawn, or somebody the other night, that absolutely has struck me. And, I've only been in this field for 40 years. I have a friend that's on a phase 1 trial, and the amount of hours, I mean, forget about how much it costs to park,
Right.
but you go to the clinic for 6 hours because they're taking blood every hour, and but even if it's not a phase 1 trial, trials take extra time, and I juxtapose that to the recent railway workers contract dispute, and what they were fighting for is paid sick leave, or not even paid sick leave, just being able to take a day of sick leave and not get fired. Either for themselves or a family member. How do you deal with that?
Yep.
Right.
I mean, this is the realities of America, and especially in rural and diverse populations that are in, lower paying jobs, and it's astounding to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's astounding to me that I didn't think about it, like I said, 30 years ago, but it really hit home.
So lots of comments online.
sure.
People,
I mean-
yeah, pretty active here, but I think we're just about out of time, right?
Well, maybe we can go another 5 minutes just to, sort of end some of these talks. I mean, I don't know if you want to add some of those questions, but just to sort of comment on that. That's why I think, that when we think about diversity, when we think about barriers, we have to be broader than some of the things that we've been harping on, because they're bigger, and that comes into making trials more simple, but it also comes into, can we provide food for people when they come all day? Like what other things and strategies can we use
Or Saturday clinics.
Right, exactly.
Or evening clinics.
Right.
And simple things like, you don't have to bring people all the way to the clinic for every little
Right.
thing.
Right.
Just let them peripheralize as much of the things that can be peripheralized. Make it where people don't,
But those have to be conscious.
Right. And I think thinking about,
Because the non-medical burdens
Right.
that go into,
Right.
and quote financial, they're
Right.
in the long run financial, that go into deciding whether you really
Right.
can go on a
And-
trial. We think of childcare, but we're mostly an older population. So yes, there are young women with children, but that's not the.
I mean, I think the institutions are very focused on these types of things, but I do think one of the good things about having advocates participate in every aspect of the trials is really to think, does this require an extra step in? Do we really need all these bloods? What is it going to feel like from the patient's perspective to simplify those things? And us really working with the NCI to the best of our ability to make sure that if there are options of do as much as we can do virtually, and accept, that where it doesn't take a patient to have to take a whole day off of work to come in for something, those things are critical for us, for our patients that are working and have to work, that can't take a day off of work.
I just wanted to address the RRC, or the recruitment and retention. No, that's okay. We have been talking about renaming, and I think Allison, who is our chair, has definitely, she's agreed with it, and I think we've received some leadership support. So I think that is forthcoming. And also, I'm a co-lead of the DIEG group with NCI to get the resources together for the matrix group. So we are working on that. So hopefully we can get some videos up there for everyone to have some access to. So that's certainly on the list. And lastly, one thing that we know through some of our other research-based partners, gift cards to support go a long way. So that's something that is, if there's funding there, we would really appreciate that at a site. And I know that the patients appreciate that. Thank you.
So you just covered what Natalie Perry said about the matrix, the resource matrix under MU-NCORP, and to call it to Brenda Ajay's attention. So I know Brenda's online. I sent her a text just now, a chat message. So So Brenda, we want you to please take this up and make it so for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, this has been so helpful. I mean, every time we do this, we at least have one or two fixable, solvable problems. And, you know, so we really appreciate this engagement, and we will definitely work with the Hope Foundation and other leadership to bring some of these issues back to see what we can do.
And with respect to the gift cards, I have heard that IRBs, and maybe the central IRB, although I can't say for sure, are rethinking this whole idea of remuneration for trial participants.
Especially for things that are very specific, like parking or food and gas and these types of things. We routinely have it in our trials for patients like that fill out their long-term patient reported outcomes, even if it's like a $15 or $20 Amazon card, you know, those types of things, you know, I don't think people really see as coercion. So, you know, I think that those things are important for us to readdress.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that the National Academies of Medicine's review of access disparities actually gloms in right on that point. That's one of their major recommendations, that this business of, you know, enticement with, you know, $20 enticements that makes people do something incredibly dangerous to themselves, you know, is just, it needs to go away. All right. Well, this has been very stimulating. Thank you, guys. You have a long list of ideas and solutions here. Thank you once again. See you in April.
Thank you so much. Yeah.